introduce to you Father Robert Garon, and he's known as Father Bob. Guess what? He grew up in the San Fernando Valley. And does that mean you did different dances or something in the valley? Dances, all kinds of different things when you grew up in the valley. Or you watched the Valley Girls dance, maybe that's it. Yeah. Well, after years in the entertainment industry doing comedy, announcing and experimenting with New Age, Father Bob had a conversion experience that changed him forever. He is going to share that experience with us and probably tell us why the New Age is so dangerous as well. He was ordained for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles in the year 2005. After he had attended St. John's Seminary. He was the associate pastor of St. Charles Borromeo in North Hollywood, and he also served as pastor as Our Lady of the Assumption in Ventura, and he's currently pastor at St. Didicus Parish in Silmar, and that's near where he grew up. So Father Bob is a member of the confraternity of priests of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, based on the spirituality of Father Luke Zimmer. And Father Bob has been involved in the charismatic renewal for many years and is active in the healing and teaching ministry, particularly touching on topics such as deliverance and healing of the family tree and healing of memories, which he told us last night that he used the format that Father John Hamps developed when he prays for healing of memories. So, Father Bob, we are grateful you are a gift to us today. Please come up and share with us. Please welcome Father Bob.
Good morning. I am very, very happy to be here. I was saying last night to Angie that I hope no other priest or anybody else that I know knows that I'm staying here at this hotel with a great view of the sea. They think all priests go through a lot of suffering, and I don't want to disappoint them. I met Father Bramage last year when he was at the SCRC, and also you were talking about Father Don Calloway. Great story that he has. I can't even come close. I think, you know, all the things that I did in my life doesn't even come close to what he did. Somebody asked me one time, he says, you were a stand-up comic. Well, I only did a little bit. I dabbled in that for about maybe 4 years. I did improvisational theater for a whole lot longer. But somebody was asking me about Father Stan Fortuna. He said, do you think you could be as funny as him? I said, yeah, if I want to lose my mind, yeah, probably just as funny as Father Stan. But it's one of the things I always used to goof around with people, you know, doing voices, you know, and stuff like that. And when I was in the seminary, the first time you get to the seminary, you're supposed to stand and introduce yourself around. And people got up and they told a little bit about themselves, where they're from, who they are, and that kind of thing. And I got up and I said, hi, how are you? It's good to see all of you. My name is Bob Garon. And I'm so happy to be here in the seminary. And a good friend of mine, who, well, he's a priest here now in San Diego, he saw me get up and do that and go, wow, they're just letting anybody in. But it was one of those things I used to love doing, still to this day, because when my dad would come home from work, because I grew up in a family of 7 kids, I'm the oldest of 7, and that's 7 kids in 8 years. 2 of them are twins. Yeah. Is my mom a saint? Yes, she is. Very much. But it was one of those things, when my dad would come home, it would be like, you know, because my dad would always have a real difficult day at work, and we'd try to crack him up. So, you know, across the table, we'd be throwing things at one another and just trying to make my dad laugh. And making voices could always crack him up. So we continued doing that, and I got into improvisational theater because I just love doing character voices. And I can recall giving my vocation story at a church in West Los Angeles, and afterwards the pastor told me that Arnold Schwarzenegger was there, and Maria Shriver. This is before he became the governor, right? So I was thinking, well, what if it inspired Arnold to consider a vocation to the diaconate? I would imagine him, like at the end of the Mass, saying, Bow your heads and pray for God's blessing. Bow your heads now, get down. And I was trying to imagine what it would be like for somebody else, you know, that would be interesting to be like a priest, you know, like let's say Jerry Seinfeld. Good morning. Peace be with you. You know, you're saying, Jerry, I thought you were a Jew. How can you become a priest? Well, it's really simple. When you take a look at Catholic guilt and Jewish guilt, it's pretty much the same thing. But growing up in the valley was kind of neat. You know, when we were growing up, it was just about, you know, having fun. We'd come home from school. I don't think we did homework. At least I didn't. I didn't do homework when I got home from school. I would do that early in the morning, you know, just before I went to school. For us, it was playing baseball when we got home. That is my first love. From the time I could throw a baseball, that was it. Every single year I'd be playing baseball. As soon as they cut the grass, it was time to start warming up and learning to play, you know, practicing going to the batting cage, hitting pop flies and that kind of thing. And in fact, when I would get a job, you know, if I ever got a job later on in my late teens, I had to make sure that it wasn't going to interfere with my baseball, right? I would go down to the field and play for hours upon hours, come home, and this is during the summer, and my brothers and I would just throw our gloves and bats in the corner, and my mom would say, "Can you take out the trash?" "No, I'm too tired." But it was just one of those things that I just loved so much. And even when I went to the seminary, because I played all the way up until the time I went to the seminary. For 27 years I played ball. And it was one of the things I missed so much. But growing up in the area where I was, it was really very simple. You know, life was very simple. It was like, we had so many people in the neighborhood who were Catholic. We'd all go to the same parish. We went to Guardian Angel, which was in Pacoima. It wasn't too far from where we were at. And now, I know that many of you have kids who are very slow about putting themselves together before they come to Mass. Now, you got kids, maybe 2 or 3 in the family, maybe 4. But when you got 7 kids trying to get ready for Mass, that was a real chore. In fact, my mom is telling me to help my brothers get ready. I said, I can't even find them, you know. We'd be the last people in the church. And it's only 10 minutes away. We'd be the last people to arrive at Mass. And as good Catholics, they always sit in the back first. The first ones come in, they always sit in the back. So the only seats that are open are right near the front. So as the pastor was giving his homily, we were walking in. He couldn't miss us. We were there every week, but he couldn't miss us, you know. But I can remember that my grandmother, God rest her soul, she was, you know, a very wonderful grandmother. She was the only grandmother I knew. Both of my grandmothers from my lineage died before I was born. But this was my step-grandmother. She was from Austria. And she was very, very faithful, prayed the rosary every single day. And she would tell me always about Padre Pio and Father Aloysius and Padre Pio, Father Aloysius and Padre Pio. Okay, I know about Padre Pio. And actually, Father Aloysius was just around the corner from where she lived in Los Angeles. So every time I would come to the house, it would be like, we're going to go over to Father Aloysius and get a blessing. Okay, fine. First Fridays with Father Aloysius meant that you were going to be there in the chapel. There's the monstrance. You're going to pray the rosary, all 15 decades at that time. And then the last thing I wanted to do was pray 15 decades of the rosary. I wanted to play baseball, you know. And so there, I remember the first time, I was thinking, okay, great, there's only 5 decades on the rosary, so I just got through this last one. Oh, they're starting another one. Oh, come on. But I was baptized in my infancy. I was confirmed at 14, but at the age of 21, I stopped practicing my faith. That's when I left the house. And I remember putting away all of the things in my brand new apartment, and I was sitting there, and it was a Sunday afternoon in the middle of the floor, staring up at the ceiling with my hands behind my head, listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Side 2. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I haven't gone to Mass today. And the second thought was, oh well, so what? And it was the first time I can recall that my faith began to fade. It took a back seat in my life. And along the way, I started getting into other practices. I got into a type of Buddhism at that time, because I was getting into acting and doing stand-up and those kinds of things. And a few years later, I got into Scientology. I had a girlfriend who was a Scientologist. You know, and when in high school, I felt really awkward. I didn't go out to dances. I didn't go to the homecoming, that kind of thing. You know, it's kind of funny. All guys go through this in high school. All of us go through this. You know, you see a young woman that you're attracted to, and you're trying to look really cool. How you doing? Great to see you. Yeah, nice to meet you. Inside going, oh, she's going to talk to me. Sorry, guys, I gave it away. But it was also my 20s that I got into rock bands too. It was like I was doing improvisation, I was playing baseball, and it wouldn't interfere with my, you know, if I was playing baseball, it didn't interfere with work didn't interfere with baseball, but then I also got into doing rock and roll. And that was, once again, something that was more me-centered. I got away from doing anything for anybody else. Even though I grew up in a family of 7 kids, my dad always emphasized family. He always emphasized family. In fact, my uncle, who was a bishop up in Canada, and Bishop Fr MacDonald, who was the fiddler? Right there. Where did you get your roots in playing fiddle? Poland, okay. Well, my uncle was on the east coast of Canada. It was more of a Scottish-Irish type of thing, you know. In fact, and he played fiddle quite often. And when he was ordained to the episcopate, there on his coat of arms was a half a fiddle. Yeah, so. But he was always telling us that the family is the domestic church. He was a big fan of Pope John Paul II. He said, the family is the domestic church. I've heard it over and over again. Yes, I got it, the family's the domestic church. Didn't realize that that would come back and be a part of my life so much later on. But I can recall that at that time, all of these things that I was doing for myself, I didn't realize how sad I was becoming. Because it was about playing ball, it was about rock and roll, it was about doing the things that I wanted to do, improvisational theater, and I was not doing well in school. I had already, after I graduated from high school, I went to college for a couple of years, but it seemed like I would take about 15 units and then drop about 6 units, and then I would take about another 12 units, and then I would drop another 3 units, and I would fail classes, and it wasn't working out for me. So my dad said to me, okay, here's what you're going to do. If you're going to stick around here, you're going to do one of 2 things. You're either going to go into the army, or you're going to go work on your cousin's pig farm. The army and the pig farm. Army and pig farm. 19 years old. I think I'll go work on a pig farm. Yeah. And all of a sudden the prodigal son came to mind, you know. So I worked on a pig farm for about 6 months, and I figured this is pretty simple. Okay, I'll wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, go out, feed the pigs, come in, you know, have a cup of coffee, and just sit and kick back for the rest of the day. Now, 5:30, that's when my cousin would wake me up. Get up! What? It's time to feed the pigs. Oh, we can do that at 9. No, you're getting up now. So I put on the coveralls, and I gotta say that the smell from a pig barn can be pretty much sensed about a good mile away. And the barn was only about 100 yards down the road. So we pretty much smelled it all the time. But when you walk into the place, it's like, oh, hell can't be this bad, really. But after working on this pig farm for about 6 months, I recognized that every one of us has to have a certain amount of responsibility. And at that time, where my mother grew up, on Prince Edward Island, the people were very faithful about going to Mass every Sunday. Now, they would run out of the church about the same time, trying to get to their cars. In fact, I think even the pastor was commenting on it at one time. Says, "You know, you're all very good about coming to Mass on Sundays, but I'll tell you what, now if you ever do this again, where you're all trying to squeeze out the door at the same time, you know, you nearly busted the doorway." And it was really horrible. You know, the people would just scurry out to their car to the Mass, but at the same time, they were faithful about going. And I see this now with the people who are in my parish. The people who are from the Spanish-speaking community are very, very faithful about going to Mass, about attending not only the church, but being very alive and active in the communities, in the different parts of the ministries that we have in the parish. And it's very inspirational to me. It's an affirmation to my priesthood. But it's something that I see that was lacking in other parts of the parish, in the English-speaking part of the community, because I know that, you know, God bless him, the pastor was there before me. He was there for 36 years. But we've got 5,700 people, or 5,700 families in the parish. So I can understand he felt a little bit overwhelmed. Yeah. So it's one of the things that I see, you know, within the parish now, that we need to be there to support one another. Now, going back to where I was at the time, trying to see about how I'm trying to get my life together, because as much as I saw people going to Mass and being still somewhat involved with Scientology, you know, it was something that I really couldn't fathom correctly, because as much as I still considered myself somewhat a Catholic, but the people who were in Scientology were saying, "Oh, you can be any faith at all, and still be a part of Scientology. You can be a Catholic and be a Scientologist. You can be a Jew and be a Scientologist. You can be a Muslim and be a Scientologist." But the reality is that Scientology wants you to put their practice first. It's about the green and white volumes. It's about what is said in their volumes. You must follow. And if you're not, then they call it, the term that they use is swirling on the technology of L. Ron Hubbard. Oh, you don't want to do that. So that was one of the things that began to creep in my mind. Oh, I don't want to do this wrong. No, my girlfriend was saying, "What are you doing? You're not following according to what we've got." Oh, yeah, you're right. And so little by little, I was being led away by that. Where was my faith? I didn't really know. I couldn't really figure it out. And it wasn't until I was about 32, 33 years old. I went to a family reunion in Canada, where my mom is from. And at this reunion, all of my mom's side of the family, my cousins, aunts and uncles, all of the people I hadn't seen in a long time, they were going to be there. Now, at that time, I was really in debt. I was in debt up to my eyeballs. I had been running up my credit cards, not really taking a look at what I was doing, just spending. And so I was thinking, all these people are going to be there at this family reunion, and I'm not going to be able to make it. And so it was one of the first times that I recall praying and really asking God on my own for something. And in that prayer, I'm thinking, Lord, I don't know what you want from me. I don't. But I know what I would like. I would like to be at this reunion. There's all of these people who are part of my family. They are going to be there. And I'm not. And I feel like I'm going to be left out. And as much as I wanted to be there, I'm thinking, okay, that's it. You know, I'll just continue on with my life and work at the Scientology company and go to Celebrity Center downtown. And the next day I get a call, and it was a family friend who was a travel agent. She calls up and she says, Bob, how come you haven't called me up? I said, why? She says, well, all of your brothers and sisters, your mom and dad, they've called me and they've arranged their tickets. How come you haven't called me? I said, well, I can't afford to go. She says, well, you didn't even ask. Why don't you just ask me? Ask him what? I can't pay for a ticket. She says, I'll tell you what. All you have to do is get the ticket, pay it when you get back. I said, but I'm in debt. You'll pay it as you go. Just ask me for a ticket. Okay, can I have a ticket? Sure. All right, great. So I'm at this reunion. And there's a lot of people in my mom's side of the family that I haven't seen in years. You know, all these cousins, these people that speak a little bit funny because they're on the east coast of Canada. At least that's the way I see it. You know? And I'm thinking, okay, I'm here. This is neat. I feel like I'm kind of part of it. But at the same time, as the weekend went on, you had all these people who were really joyful. And part of it, and I didn't discover this until later on, part of the reason that they were so joyful is because they were practicing their faith and they were living their faith. And even though I had been back there, years before when I was 19 and working on the pig farm and going to Mass, it didn't come back to me until that time that this really had a lot to do with who they are. Who they are in relation to their family as well. So I'm there, I'm among them, and I remember the first night was just a time to get together and say hi to people and that kind of stuff. The next day was this banquet. My aunt, Claire, she and her husband had a farm on the east end of the island, and she had everything arranged. She had all these picnic tables. All of these, it was like, what do you call those, canvas awnings or whatever, tents, well, kind of like that. But just something to keep the sun off you. So everybody had prepared something and were there. It hadn't rained on the island for like 3 months. There had been a little bit of a drought. Because it rains like once a week back on PEI. And that night, all of these clouds are pulling up and getting darker and darker and darker. And there was a pig roasting on the spit. We're getting ready to start this thing. It starts raining and pouring. And we're thinking, oh, great. Now, this is the night that all people are here for this Henry Sandy reunion. And now it's ruined. My uncle says, no problem, we'll pull all the tractors out of the barn, put all the tables in there, and we continued on with the banquet. And we're soaked from head to toe, and my uncle's playing the fiddle, and all the people are there. I'm thinking, why is this so special? Why is this making such a difference in my life? I don't know about everybody else there, but I feel like I'm an outsider, and I want to be here. I want to be in. I want to be among all these people who have this joy in their life. And for some reason, I felt like I couldn't feel it. And throughout that rest of the weekend, I'm still trying to figure it out. The next morning, we had a Mass outside under one of those tents that my aunt had. Early in the morning, and one of my cousins was playing the bagpipes, Amazing Grace. I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. My uncle's celebrating the Mass here. And why do I still feel like an outsider? So I came back from that reunion, and questions started going through my mind. And my girlfriend, the Scientologist, is saying, how come you seem so distant? How come, you don't want to talk about anything? I said, well, I don't know. I'm just going through a real difficult situation. I don't know what to explain. How to explain this? And over the next week, I decided I better pull out the scripture. I better pull out the gospel. Never pulled out the Bible on my own before. But that week, I opened up the Gospel of Matthew. I went from Matthew through John in about a week and a half. And while I'm reading this, I'm reading about the fulfillment of the promise in Matthew. I'm reading about the humility of Jesus in Mark. I'm reading about the prodigal son in Luke, and I saw myself in that, and remembering what had happened when I was working on the pig farm. I was reading about the divinity of Christ in John, and the bread of life discourse, and what that really meant. And my mom didn't tell me until years later that while we were back there, she was praying that somebody in the family would consider a vocation to the priesthood or religious life. So, I didn't think about becoming a priest at the time, but that's what my mom told me later. So I'm still trying to figure this out. But and my dad was a third order Franciscan. Still is. Both my mom and dad practiced at third order Franciscans. And I called up my dad and I said, look, you know, I've got a lot of questions regarding Scripture, and I don't know how to figure this out, so you're going to have to help me. But you're practicing a faith that I know we all grew up with, and I just don't get it about like what's going on with the sacraments. I don't understand the sacramental part of the Mass. And so my dad was explaining that to me. I said, well, okay, and the sacrament of reconciliation, I don't really get that either. And so he explained that to me. And so there was a little bit of silence, and I said, okay, now when do you and Mom go to Mass on Sundays? He said, well, we go to 9:30 at St. Francis of Xavier. And I said, well, would you mind if I join you for Mass this Sunday? Silence on the phone. He goes, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay. It's just that, you know, I just want to know if it would be okay if I joined in with Mass. He said, sure. So that following Sunday, I'm sitting between my mom and my dad. And I'm listening to the homily, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see my dad kind of like looking over at me, you know. And afterwards, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is terrific. I'm going back to Mass. I feel a little bit better about that. I still don't understand my faith so much, but maybe I should go to a church that's close to where I was at. Now, I'd moved out of my girlfriend's house, and I went to Simi Valley. And I was living in Simi Valley at the time, and I began attending Mass at St. Rose of Lima. And at St. Rose of Lima, that particular Sunday that I walk in, the pastor says, by the way, if anybody's considering a retreat, we've got a retreat that's coming up next weekend up in Santa Barbara, and we would invite all the men of the parish to be a part of it. So I went out and I signed up for the retreat. Next weekend I went, and all these people who I had, never met before, because it's a brand new parish for me, are welcoming me and inviting me to be a part of this, inviting me to be a part of that. And we have a carnival coming up. Why don't you do this? And I said, I just joined the parish for the first time, Why would you want me to be a part of anything? But that weekend, I'm listening to a priest by the name of Father Gregory Elmer, who is a Benedictine monk. And Father Gregory is somebody who not only does he read the Scripture and pray the Scripture, because Lectio Divina is very much a part of his life, but he can break open the Word like nobody else, and he was getting into not only the Gospel of John, the letters of John, but also the mysticism of Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, and it began to make sense to me. And afterwards, he was hearing confessions of anybody who wanted to go to confession. And I said, you know what? I haven't been to confession in a few years. And maybe this is time for me to go. And I went to confession that night for the first time in probably about 15 years. And I sat down, and the first thing he says to me is, keep in mind that the Lord Jesus comes to wash our feet. And all of a sudden, I start going, and he's sitting there handing me tissues while he's hearing my confession. And I got all this garbage out of me, and I'm thinking, wait a second, where does this all come from? And there are times during that confession that I was saying things that I forgot all about, and it's just coming out. It was almost like a deliverance. And when I was done, I felt free. I was swept clean. That's the way I felt. In fact, I remember walking out of that confession. It was already dark outside. I'm looking up at the sky, and I'm seeing the stars, and I'm thinking, wait a second. I haven't looked up in such a long time. I don't even recall seeing the stars, because most of the time I was walking with my head down. That's how much I was burdened. And I came home from that retreat. And I was thinking, wow, Dad, this was so terrific. You know, all these things happened over the weekend. I was learning more about like John of the Cross and about Teresa of Avila, about John in Scripture. This is fantastic. I got to tell you all about it. And he asked me, he says, by the way, have you heard about what's going on over in Yugoslavia? I said, what's going on over in Yugoslavia? Oh, wait a second. Yes, I know about the war that's going on. I said, oh, it's horrible over there. He says, no. Did you know Our Lady is appearing there? And I felt like Scooby-Doo. He goes, what? No, Our Lady's appearing there. And says, really? I said, wow. And she said, and my dad says, here's a book. I just read it. It's by Wayne Weibel. It's a place called Medjugorje. Okay. Really? So he gave me the book, and I opened up the book. And normally it takes me a long time to go through a book. Somebody can give me a book, and it'll sit on the shelf for like years. And then I'll just out of whim, I'll pull it off the shelf. I'll read about halfway through it, and I'll put it away. I started reading that book, and I couldn't put it down. In 2.5 days, I went through that book. And there were certain parts I had to read over and over and over again just to make sure I got this correctly. But there were certain things that she was telling us that we need to do. And I began to say, okay, if Our Lady is telling us to do this, the Mother of God is telling me to do this, then I've got to do this. First of all, praying the rosary. Okay, I get that. Second, reading Scripture. I was already doing that. Okay, third, you've got to go to confession. Okay, I just went to confession. I'll go to confession. Yeah, okay, once a month. Very good. I can do that. You have to go to Mass often. Okay, I can do that. You've got to fast. I got to what? No, fasting, you gotta be kidding me. You see, for me, fasting was the F word. The fast, I'd heard about it, but that was not something I was going to do. But she kept on emphasizing what is fasting for us. In fact, even when I talk to people at the beginning of Lent about fasting, and even though it's a part of our faith, it's not just a part of our faith, it's a part of the Judeo-Catholic tradition. You talk about fasting and people just like tune right out. Big flat line across their forehead. Okay, I'll do the bread and water fasting. Okay, fine. I'll do that twice a week. Funny thing is, within the first 2 months, after beginning this whole regimen of praying the rosary, and it took me a while to get back to praying the rosary again. My grandmother had taught me how to pray the rosary when I was, about 10 years old. She was teaching me how to pray the rosary, and I remember praying it. But it had been such a long time since I prayed the rosary. I was praying, okay, the big beads are the Our Father, the smaller beads are the Hail Marys, and the glory beads in there someplace. And I didn't remember the rest of the prayers, but I was praying it. And it took other people to show me how to pray the rosary. Somebody in my parish, when I started going to St. Rose of Lima, gave me one of those scriptural rosary books. And at that time, it only had the 15 decades. It wasn't until I think I was in my second year of theology that Pope John Paul II had added the next 5. But at the same time, it was something that I began to do every single day. I was praying it all the way to work and coming home. But I was fasting on Wednesdays and on Fridays, and it was not easy to do. I was doing the bread and water fast, and then I started being able to fast where you're going without a meal. I'm doing bread and water. I'm going without 2 meals, and then just doing bread and water for the one. But after the end of 2 months, there was a huge difference in my life. The things that I was doing and the things I gave up to. I was still playing baseball. I hadn't given that up. But the last year in the league that I played, just before I went to the seminary, there were like 38 teams in the league that I was playing in. And we won the championship the year before I went to the seminary. It's like, is this like a gift? Is this what you're saying, Lord? That you're giving me a gift for going to the seminary? But it was just kind of neat that all of these things were changing. Now, by this time, my girlfriend had said, okay, we're quits. I said, yeah, you're right. And I had started dating another woman who was the first one who had brought God into my life. I had dated her years ago, and she was the first one who asked me, who is God to you? And that was a question that kind of hit me right between the eyes. And I said, nobody's ever asked me, who is God to me? Well, let me think about that. Who is God to me? Is he God? I didn't know what to think of that. But it was one of those things that she kept on asking me. She was a Greek Orthodox. Now she's got married since, and we kind of lost track of one another. But it was one of those things that continued to invite me to look at what is a relationship, and especially in relation to God. So, at that time, I wasn't considering the vocation. Still wasn't considering it. But a short time later, I was praying on the way home in the car, and something gave me this impression that something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. I got home, and I heard from my mom that my brother-in-law's oldest brother had died in a freak accident. And it bothered me because he and I were the same age. We're both 35. Both of us had a great sense of humor. He was a little bit twisted in his sense of humor. But he was a good father, and he was a good husband, and he gave so much to the community. And I was thinking, I'd like to be like him. I'd like to be like John. And then my mom calls and says, did you know that John died in an accident the other day? I went, oh, you're kidding. It really bothered me. And so I was praying, and I was praying the rosary, and I'm sitting there next to my bed, and I'm thinking, Lord, why would this happen? Why would you allow this to happen to him? He had so much to offer. And it was like a voice that said to me, well, what do you have to offer? I asked you first. And in that moment, I'm thinking, well, I don't know. And the first thought that came to mind was, well, I don't want to be a priest. And the second thought was, well, why did I say that? Because I've never even thought of that before. The next 3 weeks, that's all I could think about. Okay, if I was a priest, then I would be celebrating Mass every day. If I was a priest, I'd be hearing confessions. If I was a priest, I'd be going to the hospital. Now, what would that be like, going to visit people in the hospital? And that's all I was consumed with. Not so much about baseball, but about becoming a priest. Wow, what would that be like? And I recall going over to my mom and dad's house, and my dad and I were talking. In fact, we were actually arguing, because he and I would get into arguments about finances all the time. And at the end of the argument, I said I was sorry, and he said he was sorry. And there was silence. And then I said, I've been thinking about becoming a priest. And he was the one that had the Scooby-Doo reaction. You want to be away? I'm thinking about becoming a priest. This is something that's occupied my head for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And then he got up from the table and ran down the hall. I go, oh man, I made him feel bad. I thought he would have liked that. He comes back and he's got his diary. And there in his diary, one of the last entries of his high school year, just after he graduated, says, I want to become a Franciscan priest. Now, he went off into the Air Force, and when he came back from the Air Force, he met my mom, and so that kind of like put an end to that. But he wanted to share that with me. And I said, look, Dad, that's fantastic. This is great. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about that. But don't tell Mom. Don't tell anybody. How come you're laughing when I say that? Don't tell Mom. I'm on my way home and I'm feeling so good that I told my dad about this. I finally told somebody. I was so happy and peaceful. And I drove down the 118 freeway and I said, great. Okay, I got that off my chest. I told somebody. I get home. I pull up into the driveway. I walk into the house. The phone rings and I said, hello? Bobby, are you really thinking about becoming a priest? You and Dad don't keep any secrets from one another, do you? No, we don't. Okay. So I said, just, try to keep it between yourselves. Yes, but all my brothers and sisters, before the end of the evening, all got on the phone and they were calling me. So now my whole family knows, and I went to Mass that following Sunday. And I said, okay, now at least I've talked to somebody about this. I've told my family. And so now, how do I tell somebody in the church? And I said, well, I don't know, who am I going to talk to? I'm going to talk to one of the priests eventually, so I don't know how this is going to do it. But I walked into Mass that following Sunday, and I'm there throughout the Mass, and this is going through my mind. And then at the end of the Mass, the presider said, by the way, if anybody is considering a vocation to the priesthood or religious life, please come see me after Mass. So I go over to the rectory door and I knock on the door, and the Father John, who was actually the presider at the Mass, says, can I help you? I said, yes, I heard you say if anybody's considering a vocation to the priesthood to come see you. Oh, I didn't think anybody was listening. Hello! So, he put me in touch with the vocations office, which was terrific. That was great. I was so happy. I got a chance to talk to the vocation director, and I told him about my story, and he said, okay, now what you've got to do is over the next couple of years, you've got to come to some of these events. We've got vocation meetings, and we've got some of these other things coming up, and I went to every single one of them. I had to hear if maybe there was some kind of an answer that I'm looking for, if I'm really being called or not. Or maybe there's a loophole that's saying maybe I'm not, but I was looking for something that they would, and every one of them I went to, every event was an affirmation that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So, it was great. Now, how do I tell Helen? Because Helen and I were dating and I was thinking about, and we went to this one show that was at the Civic Arts Plaza in Thousand Oaks, and I remember we were going to Denny's afterwards. And afterwards, we're sitting there at Denny's, thinking, I've been thinking about this for quite a long time, and this is something that's really a commitment, but I think you need to hear this. She puts her fork down and she says, yes. We've been talking about this, we've been talking about God, and I really believe this has a lot to do with my life. She says, your life? I said, yeah, I'm thinking about becoming a priest. That's not the answer I was looking for. But the funny thing is, from that night on, she became one of my biggest supporters. But it was terrific. All of these affirmations were saying, okay, I'm in the right direction. I'm headed in the right direction. And it was like that first year that I was in the seminary, the first year that I got there, the first month, the first week, the first day that I was there, I felt like, you've seen those pictures of Snoopy in the Peanuts cartoon where he's got his head back, his arms out to the side, and his ears like this? That was me. That's the way I felt. I was telling my spiritual director, you know, I had a spiritual director that week. I said, this is the way I feel. He says, that's nice. And he could almost see that, you know, like every guy who walks into the seminary is feeling pretty much the same thing. Well, it didn't take very long. About within the first 3 months that I was there at St. John's Seminary, you had all these guys who were just out of the home for the first time, their home where they grew up, and they were pulling pranks on one another, and they were turning their stereo up, and they were running down the hall doing all these pranks on other people, and they were smoking outside the dorm, and I was getting mad. I was getting so mad I couldn't study. You know, it was almost like I felt like Yosemite Sam, you know. Ooh, I hate that seminarian. You know? And I would go to the chapel, and I would sit in the chapel, and I would pray, and I would just pray, Lord, please give me peace, please give me peace. And all these people would probably come by, and they would see look into the window and see me praying there and saying, oh, look how pious he is. Look, he's there again. And inside, just please give me some peace inside because I want to strangle my next door neighbor. But it was one of those things where I recognized that my conversion had not stopped. It was continuing. And the other thing was that as much as the rosary had become a part of my life all the way up to the seminary, it had stopped. I had stopped praying the rosary. And I needed to get back to that. It was Our Lady who brought me to that point in my life. Why should I stop speaking to my mother? She needs to hear from me. You know, she needs to hear from me. I need to hear from her. I need to hear from her son. I need to keep that union. And this is something that I feel bad about the priests who don't have that kind of identity with Our Lady. And it's something we need to pray for them to do. Because if they are going to be priests, if they're going to be ministering to all of us, then they have to be Jesus. I was at a conference in Illinois a few weeks ago, and Father John Esseff, who is the exorcist for the Diocese of Scranton, Pennsylvania, he was saying to all of us who were there, all these priests, if you are ordained by Christ, then therefore you yourself, you are Jesus. And the first couple of days we're going, okay, all right, yeah, we are Jesus. By the end of the retreat, the entire retreat, we go, oh, yep, you're right. Yep, we are Jesus. And it was something that we have to recognize. If we are going to be ministers of the sacrament, then we must be Christ to people. And therefore, if we are Christ to people, we need to stay in union with His mother. And the unfortunate thing is there are so many priests who don't have that unity. So we need to pray for them. We need to pray for every one of them. Not only to come in union with Our Lady, but really to identify with who Jesus is, to become more holy. We're not completely holy, and especially not by ourselves. Only God can make us like that. But it was something that I recognized as time went on when I was in the seminary. Because I know that there are guys who are like 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And the evil one is doing everything he can to discourage us, but especially for guys who are trying to go towards the priesthood. So, as much as I know that I was a little bit rambling in some places this morning, it's a story I haven't been able to tell for a few years, so I'm glad that I've had this opportunity this morning to be able to share it with you. One of the artists that who's become one of my favorites is Michael John Poirier. And while I was in the seminary and even afterwards, I listened to his CDs all the time. And it's something that I would encourage people, if you can, if you don't have music that you're listening to, especially in relation to Christ, please find something. It is an affirmation for us. But Michael John Poirier has one particular song. It's called Miracle. It goes like this. When you try to be faithful, but you're haunted by doubts, if you're wondering if love will ever win out. When you're lost and confused and you don't know what to do, let me work a miracle in you. When your heroes are falling like stars from the sky, when you try to be, when you're feeling afraid and you don't know why, when your struggles are many and your victories are few, let me work a miracle in you. Run to me on Calvary's hill. Come and see where time stands still. Lay down your burdens and lift up your eyes. See, I have paid the price. So if you try to be faithful and you're haunted by doubts, if you're wondering if love will ever win out, when you're lost and confused and you don't know what to do, let me work a miracle in you. Let me work a miracle in you. Thanks.